Welcome to Live Well, Dream Big. I'm Suzanne Monroe, founder of the International Association of Wellness Professionals, where I've been teaching people how to live a life of wellness, tap into their passion, and go for their dreams for over 15 years. I believe living well and dreaming big starts with ourselves. This podcast will show you how to create a healthy, holistic life, empower your mindset, follow your dreams, and make a big impact. Let's dive in right now. Hey everyone, welcome to Live Well, Dream Big. Today we're talking about your big vision, how to create one and stick to it, even when the going gets tough. I'm joined by my team member and IAWP Certified Master Wellness Coach, Laura Albers. And we're having this conversation on vision because, a lot of people have lost sight of their vision in the last year. With everything going on in the world, you might feel like your goals and plans got derailed, right? And your big vision, even if it feels far off in the distant future, especially during challenging times, it's there to support you. So today we're going to talk about the 3 types of visions you want to have, how to create them, and how to reach them. If you enjoy this episode and want to hear more in holistic wellness, mindset, and empowering your purpose, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode and share the show with a friend. All right, thanks for tuning in. Let's get started. Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be talking with you today about your big vision, how to create one and stick to it, even when the going gets tough. And I'm really glad we're talking about this today because I've heard from a lot of listeners and people in our community over the past few months and really over the last year. And people feel like, their vision has kind of gotten derailed with everything that's happened in the world. Who can be thinking about, your big vision when you're dealing with all the challenges of the day to day? So today we're going to be talking about how to create a vision in your personal life, in your relationship with others, and with your purpose. And we're also going to talk about what to do really when the going does get tough, whether the world is hit by a pandemic or anything else that might be coming your way. Because the truth is, visions are really never reached in the exact way we think they're going to be, right? We have all the plans in the world, but it doesn't always go the way we plan for them to happen. We can't plan for all the rocks and hills and bumps along the way, but we can plan to stay the course when we have the right tools and support. So I'm joined today with IAWP Master Holistic Wellness Coach, Laura Albers. Hey, Laura.
Hi, Suzanne. Great to be here.
How are you doing?
Doing well. I'm excited for this topic of vision today.
Me too. This is going to be a fun topic. And you know me, I always like to kind of give a quick definition, not always, but sometimes of the topic we're covering, at least when we're talking about staying organized and creating our visions. And with vision, according to dictionary.com, it's the ability to think about or plan the future with imagination or wisdom. And I really loved that, imagination or wisdom. It's kind of like both are essential, right? Imagination really allows us to dream about what we really want. Wisdom is the part about bringing our experience and our truth to what's possible, reaching for the stars, but also being realistic at the same time about how to get there. We don't just do wishful thinking, right? We have to have that planning piece and that action piece. So it's really these 2 parts that come together, I think, when we think about a vision. So you have a big dream and goal for what you want in life. It's possible, it's doable, but becomes a reality because you bring that wisdom piece to it through the planning and the action steps you take to get there. You really can't have one without the other. So that's what we're talking about today. And we're going to start out by talking about really the first step, which is creating your own personal vision statement. So let's just kind of start there. Why would you want to create a personal vision statement anyway? Well, it really is the first step to getting clear on your vision in any area of your life. So, a lot of people really never take the time to do this. They never take the time to really think about what they want their life to look like, whether it's goals along the way or just a bigger vision and what they want for their lives personally. And the thing is, it's hard to know how things can all fit together or what the big picture is if you don't have the big vision. So it's really about starting with the end in mind and kind of working backward from there. That's how I like to think of it. We're going to kind of break it down a little bit more today. But a vision is truly a roadmap, right? It's not just some lofty goal that's out there, some dream, and like there it is. It really is a roadmap. And if we don't have a roadmap, we're really just going through the motions every day, day after day, month after month, year after year, right? And then you wake up one day and you're like, this is not really what I had planned or wanted for my life. But the truth is, maybe you didn't plan. I got to say, I remember having one such wake up call myself in my previous life before this one, where I didn't have a vision. I didn't have a plan. I mean, I think deep down, I knew I wanted something more for my life, but I didn't know what it was. Right. And I didn't carve out the time, certainly, to think about it or dream about it or really do anything about it. But one day I did wake up and I realized, wait a second, this isn't the life I want to be living. And I started by creating a vision and really taking a step back and thinking about, okay, if this isn't the life I want, what is it that I truly want? Right. And allowing myself that time and space to really dream big. And to me, this is about giving yourself some of that time to tap into it and really letting yourself even daydream about it. And what do you want your life to look like? One of the tools I think can be really helpful for you to doing this is the Wellness 360 wheel, right? Most of you are familiar with that. If not, we have a link in the show notes, which goes to our free guide where you can get the Wellness 360 wheel. But it's a great place to start because you have the 12 elements of Wellness 360, and you can look at all of those and really start to dream big about each element and create little mini visions for each of them, or think about what areas of your life you want to improve or change. And so it's really a really great starting place for that roadmap. And then from there, you can write it out. You can use images. You can create vision boards. If you like singing, you could create a song. You could create a painting. Like, you got to put it in a form, I think, that really speaks to you, right? Because then your vision has sort of this authenticity to it and it really feels like you. And that's huge. So those are just some of my thoughts on creating a personal vision statement. What are your thoughts, Laura? Because I know you love creating visions and you help people create visions. What does a personal vision statement like do for people, do you think?
Yeah. Well, it is kind of what you said already. It's your personal vision statement really is what guides your life and provides the direction necessary to chart the course of your days and your choices. And these can be choices you make about your career, your life, your family. It's essentially like your GPS as you go through life. I mean, you would never think about going on a trip, probably without having, a map or probably more in current times, your GPS on. And this is the same thing. So I feel like writing a vision statement is really the first step in focusing on your life. And it can really just help put things into perspective, your joy, your accomplishments, your family life, your contributions, all of those things that are important to you.
Yeah. I love that. The GPS for life, right? You're like, okay, I got my GPS. Where am I going? Right. But so often we don't, we're just kind of going through the motions day after day. And we're like, what is happening? Right. So you need that GPS, you need that bigger vision. What do you think are some tips people can do to really start getting clear on the vision itself? Right. Because you're like, okay, wait, I don't have a vision. Like, what should I do? Where do I start?
Yes. Well, and we love talking about tips here on the coaching office. So I think there's some questions. In this case, I'm going to reference more questions that you can ask yourself so that you can go deeper and gain clarity. So here's just a few example questions. One of them is, what are 5 things that you most enjoy doing? And think about it in terms of like, these are 5 things that without which having them, your weeks, your months, or years would feel incomplete or you'd feel unfulfilled. Another question you may ask yourself are, what are 3 things you must do every single day to feel fulfilled in your day? Or you can think in terms of values. So maybe it's more like, what are your 3 to 5 most important values? Right? One important goal for each of the following facets in your life, as you mentioned, Suzanne, going through the Wellness 360 wheel can be super, super helpful to bring this all to life. But really think about, your physical area or your physical life, your spiritual life, your work or your career, or your business, your family life, your social relationships, financial security, mental improvement, personal development, and of course, fun, right? We need to have fun in there as well. Also, I think it's helpful to think like, if you never had to work another day in your life, how would you spend your life or how would you spend your day instead of working? That can also be really telling. And then maybe another question is, when your life is ending, what will you regret not doing, seeing, being, or achieving? And then really just thinking about what are your strengths and weaknesses, and not using your weaknesses as a source of like judgment or criticism, but really using it to kind of highlight and gain more on those strengths. And so then once you've kind of spent a little bit of time answering those questions or other types of like deep dive questions, then you can create sort of that statement, that mantra, or just simply post your top values or takeaways from your personal vision statement so that you'll see it daily. I think that's the key. And you mentioned some really cool ways too, Suzanne, of, maybe it's a painting, maybe it's a song. There's of course so many different ways you can do this. Perhaps it's a vision board, which I personally love. But what's going to happen is that you'll gradually start to incorporate more into your daily thoughts, which is really important, into your daily decisions, your daily actions, and your daily interactions with others. And so it really helps guide that whole process.
Well, here's a question that just came to mind. Is this something like you do annually, or do you like have your personal vision and you're like, I'm so set on this, like it's for life? Or do you revisit it? Do you tweak it? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, such a great question. Yeah, no, I'm personally such an avid believer of this is not like a one and done kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yes, often you'll see like, let's say like vision boards done, sort of New Year's time. But personally, and I think we've chatted about this before in previous episodes, I am such a fan of regular check-ins. For me personally, that's weekly check-ins. And it's not necessarily that means like I'm changing my vision every week, but just am I sort of in line with the things that have been on my vision board or on my sort of my life GPS, or at least, quarterly, but find sort of what works for you so that these are things that you are frequently and regularly checking in on, and it's not like you get to the end of the year and all of a sudden it's like, oh, shoot, what were those things I was wanting to accomplish or wanting to do?
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think I really truly believe when we put something down on paper or we bring it into words or into some form, we're bringing it into the physical form. First it's in our hearts, then it's kind of like in our minds, and now it's on paper or whatever form, right? It's those written words though. It's that physical form that's like, okay, it's one step closer to reality. Right. But so often we're like living in our heads. We don't really know. Right. So we brought it one closer step to reality. And I think that's huge. Right. And then we take those first steps and it's like, okay, now it's happening, but we got to bring it through our heart and our mind into this reality to be able to take that action. So I think it's huge to answer some of the questions that you talked about today. And I love that one. If you never had to spend work another day in your life, how would you spend your time?
Yes. So telling.
That's such a good one. Well, let's talk about step 2. So we just talked about, okay, these are some questions you can answer to kind of start getting clear on your personal vision statement, why you want to have a personal vision statement. Let's kind of talk about the second level. And this is really about how your own personal vision relates to others in your life and making vision statements within relationships, right? Because you're not living in a bubble in most cases, right? So you get clear on your own vision, right? And then the one thing that can happen, I think, is like, okay, you can be really excited by it and you want to share it with other people. Or kind of the flip side, you can feel kind of alone with it. Like, okay, are other people in my life going to get this? Are they going to support this? Right? So if I'm in a committed relationship with someone, does their vision align with mine? And how does that work exactly? How do these visions kind of mesh together? So let's talk a little bit about that. I mean, I think as individuals, we can have unique visions, right? We don't have to have the exact same vision as someone else. That's unlikely. But we have unique, it goes back to we have unique purposes in life. So likely your purpose is coming through your vision. But I like to think of it kind of like parallel lines, right? There's two lines running together toward maybe slightly different visions or completely different visions, really, but the lines work together in some way. And that's truly what partnership can be about. The other thing, though, is life can throw you curveballs, right? If you were just, okay, you're on your own vision roadmap, you're cruising along, but other people play a role in your life. I know in my own life, while I have my vision, curveballs are always being thrown in, right? Whether it was when I first was starting out and my son was born, not that he was the curveball, but I suddenly had to shift and do things differently. I had to balance being, the breadwinner and a mom, right? Or when my first marriage ended and I had to balance being a single mother and an entrepreneur and the leader of a community, right? Or of course, when the pandemic pandemic came along, we all had to think about, okay, how are we going to show up and do things differently, right? So these are all different types of curveballs and you probably have your own. The point is, your vision doesn't have to end if a curveball shows up, right? It might mean you're on a slightly different trajectory than what you thought or what you had planned for. And I think that can be the beauty of it too, because we can feel like we suddenly got derailed. But if we see the beauty in it and we say, okay, my vision still exists, but guess what? I'm not the only one driving the vision, right? There's a greater force at work, and we're kind of co-piloting our vision in many ways. I think, we can control it, but we can't control everything. And we have a big part in it, but we also have to let go sometimes and realize, okay, there might be another little side road here that we're going down that we didn't realize, but it's still going to get us to the same place. Or maybe even to a better place. What about that, right? So sometimes this other force or part has different plans for us, and sometimes they work out even, I think, in a greater way than we would have thought, even though it may not really seem like that at first when you first get derailed or you get that curveball. But what it comes down to is we have to be willing to pivot. We have to move slightly right or left sometimes, and it may just be another path to the vision that we weren't totally expecting. So I think curveballs can be really meant to help us get to our vision. I mean, Laura, what are your thoughts on being in relationship with others and then maybe having more than one or different visions at work? Like, how do those play out together?
Yeah. Well, I just want to say too, before we kind of dive into that just a little bit. I mean, I love what you mentioned about like this has never been, I feel like, more true with this pandemic, happening right now of like needing to pivot. And I definitely have been experiencing that myself, and it's turned out even better than I expected in some ways. So I do think there's some tips also for creating a relationship vision. So it can, of course, be really helpful to create a relationship vision with the people most important to you, your most important relationships, whether that's with a spouse or a partner, your child or children, your parents, or any other sort of significant relationship or significant person in your life. So if you and your partner have been trying to bring your individual visions into reality, it can be a frustrating experience if neither of you knows, the other's dreams or the other's vision. So a relationship vision is really what enables you and your partner to focus your energy, on creating the outcomes you both want in the relationship. And so I feel like it offers that really clear direction, as we talked about in the previous step, sort of that clear GPS about what actions to take each step of the way.
I love this. This totally makes sense. I mean, how many times do people probably never have these conversations within relationships, right? And then you kind of live with these frustrations, or you don't have these, you just never take the time for this sort of communication. So I think it's so huge to not only create your own vision, but inspire your partner or anyone you're in relationship with to do it and have the conversation, right? I think we really need that roadmap in relationships, especially. So this is huge. And I know you like to break things down into action steps, Laura. So what do we do once we're like, okay, I'm gonna try the relationship vision? What do I do?
Yes. Great question. Okay. So really it's, there's a few steps here. Step one is to really co-create a relationship vision. Okay. So this can, again, look like all sorts of different things, but one, sort of simple way to do this, just get a blank piece of paper. And each of you, you and your partner, or your important relationship, separately, you'll write out like short sentences that sort of describe your personal vision of the relationship that you want with one another. So a tip here too is actually to write each sentence in the present tense as if it were already happening. So let me give you just some examples to maybe make this a little bit more clear. So some examples could be, we have fun together. We are loving parents. We hug a lot. We respect each other. We rely on and trust each other. We travel frequently. We have, date nights monthly or whatever that looks like. So those are just some examples. And think about, of course, what that could mean for you, which of those resonated. And of course, there's so many more that you could add. So write at least, I would encourage you just to kind of start, like write at least maybe 5 or 6 vision statements. But really let your imagination go wild. Like, don't get stuck in, is this really realistic, or possibly even do we have the money for that or the time for that? Like, don't get stuck in what could hold you back. Just really let that imagination go wild and sort of dream here. So once you finish co-creating your mutual vision, then you can sort of read it out loud to each other, taking turns with alternating lines and kind of mirror back. Or you can simply, you can find whatever way feels, sort of the easiest for you. But that's a really great way to do it, is to kind of compare the list together.
All right. Can I just interject here? Because I'm going to say, I pretty much like everything you said on that list, which is like, like date nights, travel, hugging a lot. Like, we'll just steal your list. Is it me, or is this just all the ladies on the show today who think this? No. Okay. We'll run with
lots of hands up.
Create your own, create your own, or just use Laura's. Either way.
Yes. I may have just done that hard part for you.
Okay.
Yes, exactly. So then step 2 is really about comparing the list. And it's really, so when you're doing this, whenever you identify similar items, it doesn't have to, of course, be the exact same wording, but you'll notice themes probably. Place a check mark next to the items that you and your partner both listed. And it doesn't matter, again, it doesn't matter if you use a little bit different words, as long as the general idea is the same. So if your partner mentioned anything you agree with, or basically don't object to, but maybe you didn't think of it yourself, right? That's the beauty of kind of having you both do this. You can add that then to your list as you go. And so then each of you can kind of place that check mark next to it as you go, because that's something that's really meaningful and impactful for both of you. But you may run into your partner, writing down something in which you don't really agree. I would encourage you really not to discuss it at that time. Just draw like a thick, line below it, or, circle it, something like that. And you can then, it's basically an opportunity for future dialogue, so that you can kind of grow together on it. So you don't need to like have all this figured out and one and done kind of in one setting. This is, again, as we talked about in the previous step, this is going to be something that likely is going to evolve over time. And so then I would recommend you post your list and, or, maybe agree to revisit the list periodically just to see if any changes need to be made, or maybe if there's anything on your list that you particularly need to work on. And I think that's another great thing about this, is it can highlight some opportunities. And again, I'm very clear to say opportunities and not like shortcomings or weaknesses or opportunity, or, places to be critical. It's really opportunity to continue to grow together in your vision.
Yeah. I love it. I'm laughing. So you shouldn't put like a big red X through those ones where you're like, that's not happening. No. Okay. That's
maybe it depends what it is.
Okay. No, but I love you're saying, these are not shortcomings. These are opportunities for future dialogue and mutual growth. Right. And like, then it gets about like, okay, like maybe we have different visions. It doesn't mean we don't love each other or we shouldn't be in a relationship, but it's like, how do we support each other to have each person experience their own visions too, right? Like someone might like traveling to, exotic locations and you don't. And, it doesn't mean that they can't do that. So it's kind of interesting, I think, but I like how you say, you don't have to discuss it all right now. This is kind of more, let's just get it on paper. Let's have this conversation. And those are future dialogue points to kind of review in the future and maybe take one by one rather than doing them all at once.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, I love that, Laura. Let's talk. So we've talked personal, we've talked relationships, and let's talk about kind of this other bigger picture, our purpose or our business or our careers, right? Because so many of our live listeners are holistic wellness coaches and training here at the IAWP, and they're really on this path to living well and dreaming big. And they're like, hey, I want to create this vision also for my business and how I'm going to help people and everything I want to do in the world. And this is really important. So let's talk bigger picture too, because how do you bring a vision to your work, your business, your purpose? Maybe your personal vision includes this, but how do you bring this part of life, I think, into if you're here to make a difference in what you're doing every day? I think you're working toward a personal vision, right? And then being in relationship with others, like even those two things alone, that can take up a bunch of time. And it can be hard to even carve out time for your big purpose vision or your business vision or career vision, right? But it truly does need to be done if you're on the path to sharing your vision with the world. Otherwise, I think you're going to end up kind of frustrated and not having those action steps and plans for where you truly want to go. So the biggest thing I think you can do, again, is kind of take that step back, really, and really envision what you see yourself doing every day for the purpose side of things or for the work side of things. And yeah, this can get commingled with so many thoughts we have on success and even money too. So I would say for this idea, kind of let some of that go. Even going back to your question before, Laura, okay, if you never had to work another day in your life, what would you be doing, right? Don't think about, oh, I can't make that happen, or financially this isn't going to work, or I don't have the skills. Let some of that go and just start with the daydream part, start with the big vision, and really see what you see yourself doing that would bring you meaning and joy. And that's the big vision. But then of course there's the how, which are all those thoughts running in your head. Like, yeah, how's this going to happen? How do I make it happen? And we'll talk a little bit about that, but I will share this. Our vision here at the IAWP, just to give you an idea how this works, and we're always tweaking our vision and looking at it every year. But our vision is to create a global community of holistic wellness coaches who transform the health and wellness of every human being on the planet. That's a pretty big vision, right? You're like, okay, that seems literally impossible, but that's kind of how visions are. They should be big, right? And then you get into the how, and the how is really your mission. The mission are the steps that you're going to take to make it happen. So our mission here is to provide holistic training, proven systems, and personal support that empowers holistic wellness coaches to improve the health and wellness of people everywhere, right? So you have the big vision, and then you have the mission, which is the how. It makes it more clear about how you're going to do it. And here's the big thing about it. If something doesn't align with the mission, then you don't do it, right? And I think this is really important when you're on the path to, especially if you're starting your own business or going out there and helping people, right? You could be saying yes to everything. But if you have your vision and you have your mission, you're like, oh, okay, I can't say yes to everything because it will actually keep me from reaching the vision. And so I know that these are only things that align with this that I can actually do and say yes to. So you really have to start looking at what you're doing and where you're spending your time, right? Let's take this podcast, for example. This podcast is really about providing holistic training and support to improve the wellness of people everywhere, right? As really a first step. And it's just a great way to introduce people to the idea of not only wellness, but coaching, and either being supported by a coach or maybe considering a career change, depending on where you are in your journey. So it also allows us simultaneously to support our community of wellness coaches who are on the path to improving the health and wellness of people everywhere. So is the podcast a yes for us? Yes, it is, right? But if it didn't fit with the mission, then it wouldn't be, right? So you're like, oh, should I do a podcast? Well, I don't know. Does it really fit with your mission, right? It might not at this time, and that can change and evolve. But I think this really helps you with some of those decision makings, especially in the beginning, the decision-making process and where you should spend your time. Still, though, you might be wondering, all right, how do I get clear on the business vision? Laura, I know you have tons of tips on this. Let's try to share some of them today, because if people are listening today and they're sitting there thinking, okay, I get this, but I'm still kind of stuck. How do I even decide what I should be doing in life with my purpose and my career? What are your thoughts?
Yes. Well, as we've been, of course, talking about today, it's so important to have that vision or that roadmap, and your business or your career is no different. So again, I'm going to give you some questions that you can ask yourself, and I would encourage you maybe to journal about or just kind of reflect upon and think more deeply about the questions as I ask them. And of course, you'll want to give some time, probably later as well, and just answer each one as authentically as you can. As you said, Suzanne, try not to get stuck kind of in the how or kind of in the weeds at this point. You just want to dream kind of as big as possible. So here's some of the questions. You mentioned this as well a bit. How do you define career success? And that's really, how do you define it? Not how someone else defines it or how you think you should define it. And I really would encourage you to extend or go beyond salary or revenue. Often we get hung up on a certain number, especially I think as entrepreneurs, we need a certain, revenue goal or something like that. And yes, that can be part of it, but there's so much more that goes into that. Like, for example, for me, work-life balance is hugely, hugely important. So for me, that's like a huge vision piece to my career vision. That's a huge part of it. So think about how you define career success. You can also think about, what would an ideal day look like? And get really as specific as you can. Like, what do you imagine yourself doing? What kind of hours are you working? What does that really look like? And then you can ask yourself, are you achieving some level of success in your current job or your business? And if so, get really clear on what that success is, or what is it that you enjoy in your current job or business. And likewise, it might be helpful to look at, what do you currently maybe not enjoy in your current job or business? And those things then can help define more of, where do you want to be heading? And this is a kind of similar to that question we asked earlier, but what would you want to do today if all your bills were paid and you had relatively unlimited cash reserves? How fun would that be? So think about, what would you do if that were the case for you? Another question you can ask yourself is, what would your career be like if you had the power to make it any way you wanted? Because again, sometimes we get stuck in the how, or it can feel unrealistic or something. So if you had that magic wand, how would you make your career? You can also think about, who are the people that you most admire? And so what is it about them or their careers that attract you to them? Is there something about what they have or something about what they do that you want for your career vision? And I have to say, Suzanne, I know we've kind of talked about this before in previous episodes, but this is not about, this is not a time for that compare equals despair sort of thing. This is not a time to like judge yourself or think, oh, well, I can never do it as good as they can, or who am I to do this? They've already, nailed this piece of their business or something. This is truly used as a way to, go deeper about your own journey. We're all on our own journey. Yeah. A couple more questions I'll share for today. Of course, there's so many more, but we'll focus on a few more today. So another one is, do you feel as though you have a gift or a calling? And then how can you share this gift or this calling in the best way, that will fulfill you? You can also, of course, think about where would you like your career to be in maybe the next year, the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. And then lastly, what's the story of your ideal career or your ideal life? And try really imagining your future. Maybe write a story that describes it. And so you can sort of put all of that together, and that really becomes your career or your business vision. So I'm curious your thoughts, Suzanne, on any of those tips or questions.
Yeah. I mean, what comes to mind, a couple things. First of all, I just feel like, on one hand, you might be like, okay, there's all these questions, but I think really when you allow yourself to sit down and go through the process and be in a good space, like, carve out some time to do it. Don't just like do it really rushed, like right now as you're listening to the episode, grab a cup of tea or whatever, and really just say, okay, I'm going to spend 30 minutes, an hour, or whatever it is to just like allow this process to unfold. And I think sometimes when you do that, things come through that maybe you're almost surprised at yourself, right? So that's really huge. And then I'm also reminded of Martin Luther King Jr.'s quote, who said, you don't have to see the whole staircase, just take the first step, right? So you may not know all of the little steps you need to take as you're answering these questions, right? You're like, oh, this is what I would want to do, or this is what I want to do. But then your ego mind is coming and saying, well, you don't know how to do that. You can't think of those things right now. You're going to put down the vision, and then the first steps are going to come, and then more will appear, right? You want to get to this top of the staircase. Maybe you can't even see the first step, right? But that first step will come, and then the next, and the others appear as you go. So I think it's just important to keep in mind, you don't have to know all the steps when you're in this process of creating the vision. I mean, do you agree with that, Laura? You can't have the entire like step-by-step plan laid out for you.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's because you invest that time in creating your vision that those steps start to become more clear.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
The steps become more clear. And then as you take one step, the other steps do reveal themselves. And of course, you have to keep in mind that maybe some of your steps are, hey, I don't know, but I need to get support around this, right? Support is like a really huge step. So you're like, hey, I don't know how to get to this vision. And if you're going it all alone, that can seem really tough. But if you realize that there's different people and opportunities and support that can come in to support your vision, I think that's really freeing too. You're not necessarily going it alone.
Absolutely. Well, and I know we've talked even a few times today already about this idea of the GPS, but think about it. If you were going on, a long road trip, especially to a place you've never been, you most likely wouldn't just start out driving, right? Like you would set the destination, the final destination. You would use your GPS or some kind of map or something, because if you don't, likely that journey is going to take so much longer, or just be more potentially, frustrating, or, having more detours, things like that. So it's so important to really invest that time in the beginning and sort of as you go, to really get to that vision, to really create what it is that you want for your life.
Yeah, I love it. Keep the GPS in mind for sure, right? And also know sometimes the GPS suddenly takes you off a different course or plan. You're like, wait a minute. Or don't you sometimes, are you ever like driving and you're like, wait a minute, I think this is the better way to go. You're like kind of like fighting with the GPS. Like, should I do the GPS or my own way? Like before GPS, I would sit down and be like, okay, here's where I'm going, and check the road and like, no, you're kind of like trusting your own self. And then there's So it's kind of this interesting dynamic, but I think as it relates to the vision, it's kind of similar. It's like, okay, it might veer off a slightly different course than what you were planning, but ultimately it's heading toward the same place. And so sometimes you got to let that process unfold.
Oh my gosh, I love that. That's such a great point. That's such a great point. There's going to be sometimes detours, whether that, of course, if you're actually driving, that could be traffic or, an accident or road work or whatever. Same is true in life. Like we're going to probably have those detours or curveballs, as you mentioned earlier in your life. And if you have that vision, that's going to allow you to pivot or transition or take a little bit different route, but you still have that vision in mind.
Yep. This has been awesome, Laura, talking with you today about the big vision. I think we've really hashed out some how-to for everybody, whether it's in personal, whether it's in relationships, whether it's in career or purpose or your business, whatever you're up to in life. And you know what? Pick one of these. You don't have to do them all at once. Like that would be a pretty big project. Like it's great to start with the personal vision, but hey, maybe if you're feeling like you want to start with the relationship or the bigger purpose vision, start there, but pick one thing to do after this episode and get into action. It's been fun having everybody listening to us today. We're going to switch gears now and go to our Coaches Talk Back section. Joining our holistic wellness coaches who are out there listening in live and open up. Thank you for joining me for today's episode of Live Well, Dream Big. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. And I want to invite you to take your next step toward living well and dreaming big by downloading the Live Well, Dream Big lifestyle book. It's the ultimate guide to becoming your best self and living life on your own terms. You can grab your complimentary copy by going to the link in the show notes or heading directly to IAWPwellnesscoach.com/guide. That's IAWPwellnesscoach.com/guide.